This is OffPlanet Radio.
We get to create it every day. And
it is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it is. So let's start the recording.
Sure.
And this is OffPlanet Radio. I'm Randy Maugans. We are broadcasting from the Illuminati-occupied east coast of the United States of America, formerly known as the colonies, and I think we still are. And I'm very, very excited and pleased to have with me on the line from, I think, are you down in Oz?
Yeah.
Oh, great. This is wonderful. From Australia, Elissa Hawke. And there's a backstory to how this all happened. This is me going out onto the internet doing these incredibly random searches of things. And somehow I got fixated on Laurel Canyon. And I wound up finding a video of Dave McGowan being interviewed by my guest, Elissa Hawke. And I watched the McGowan video, and I'm going, wow, this is really pretty interesting. I never saw McGowan's face with his voice before. I actually produced a show years ago where Dave was on. But it was quite an experience to watch that video. It was wonderful. Yeah. And so I go searching. I want to know who Elissa Hawke is, and I go to your website, which is elissahawke.blogspot.com, right?
Just elissahawke.com will get you there. Oh, they both do, but elissahawke.com is easier.
That's much easier to remember, yes. And we need easy to remember now. because you know we're fluoride addled, and the chemtrails are slowly decaying the frontal lobe.
And in the morning.
Oh yeah, you know, the limbic stem is decaying, and so anyway, I go to your website and I get fixated on this wonderful little video that you are recording. It looks like you recorded it on your phone inside of a van.
That's it.
And I was engaged because what I heard in that video was so authentic. It touched me because and that's why I wanted to get you on, Elissa. Among other things, you are a stand-up comedian and a musician, correct?
Yeah.
And
I say that with no surety because I don't really do that for money, but I've done that for 15, 20 years just for pleasure.
Yeah, there's always love and then there's money, isn't that the way it is?
Yeah, if you did stand-up comedy for money, then you can't say any of the shit I want to say, so.
And that's the whole point of it. The whole point of it is that's why I'm doing this and why I can't even be on a network. I mean, I've been thrown off of networks.
Yeah. Well, you know, the outer is the new inner or something. Thanks for having me, Randy. I really appreciate that you took the time to watch anything that I made, and I really love that you connected with me in one of my ugly cry, sad, pathetic breakdown moments. That's really kind of you to reach out to me after that.
But see, those are the best moments. Because I've done this over the years. I've actually been doing radio in some form or another most of my life, but I've been on the internet for, 12 years already, and doing all kinds of stuff. But every once in a while, if you are authentic, you do something that I call just slicing open a vein. And I've done it a few times. Sometimes I scream, sometimes I rant. A couple of times I've cried, wet my pants, and done everything else that was emotionally volatile that you're not supposed to do. Because we're so proper and we're supposed to be well trained and have the good modulated voice and sound like a big talk jock, guys. And all that sucks. what really doesn't suck is when somebody gets in your face and tells you their story, and the story is one that resonates with a real human being on a life path that is wonderful, exhilarating, scary, and sometimes horrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you must be on the path. If you spot it, you've got it, as they say. So for you to have empathy for me must mean that you've had that frustration as well. And I guess that's who I'm hoping to connect with by putting that shit out there, is just how many other people, like I'm a happy, I'm a person moving through the world. Most of the time I'm fine, but when I think about what's really bringing all of us down into broken beings, and I want to share that to see, does anyone else feel like this, It's a reaching out.
Those were the exact words that I got. I've been broken for a long time now. I watched the video twice. And the reason for it was the first time I watched it, I was resonating with it. It drew up emotions in me, because this is authenticity. Because if you have not gone through what I call the dark night of the soul, then you probably have not gone down the rabbit hole and into the journey of waking up and being what I call moved out of the matrix system.
Yeah, conscious, yeah.
Yeah. So,
thinking for yourself, using your own rational mind, your logical reasoning, critical thinking skills, research, to make your own mind up about what they've told us about history, about current events, about all our schooling. It's all rubbish. And once you start to get your foot on just one little bit of solid ground that you have found and researched for yourself, then you can actually start to grow in this world. But until then, you're just floating along in this tsunami of bullshit.
Yeah. And for every person, it's different. We may get to parallel roads. We may even merge into the same lane. But I think for every person it's different. And I always like to ask people, what was that moment when you went, oh, fuck, this is real?
I have this show now called Illicit Talk, and I'm going to have you on as a guest, because this is what my whole show's about. What was the catalyst that made you fucking wake up?
Yeah.
And I tell you, because mine was really interesting. I was about 33 or something, 34. And I had an argument with my parents. Now I've got to try and tell this story without embarrassing anyone. But my parents came to my house one night, and we all had a good night. And then my dad said something. And the next day I said to my dad, you got to get some counselling because of what you said last night. And he said it in front of my brother and I. And he said, I didn't say that. I wouldn't say that. That's bullshit. I wouldn't say that. And I said, Dad, you can't just lie and say you didn't say it, because we both heard you, my brother and I. And Dad's like, no, I didn't say that. So then I was like, bloody hell, my dad just lied to me. Kind of like Bill Clinton said I didn't have sex with that woman, And it kind of made me, I guess, pull my dad down off some pedestal that I didn't even know that I'd had him on, as some kind of arbiter of truth for me. And I had always been interested in stuff like life after death and psychic abilities, because I've had my own experiences. But so I always went into that side of spiritual stuff without my dad's permission. But there was a lot of stuff about politics and the truth about what's going on in the world that I wouldn't look at, because my dad would have rubbished the sources, and my dad was my arbiter of truth up until that point. So when I had this thing with my dad, then I went and saw a medium a few weeks later, and the medium was talking about how difficult it was for him to come to his personal ability, the knowledge that he could talk to dead people, when all around us people say there's no such thing as life after death and blah, blah, blah. And he was describing how difficult it was for him to come to it. And I realized that getting rid of my dad as my arbiter of truth at age 33, through all my education and everything, that was one of the catalyst for me. And the other catalyst was just realizing that these events like 9/11 were covered over false flag events and not doing anything about it was getting on my conscience. I'd known for 4 or 5 years, and I hadn't said anything publicly about it, even though I was doing stand-up comedy and stuff. I was just doing dick jokes. And I actually realized, you know, more and more people are going to be hurt or corralled by the established forces if we don't start to step up and say, no, I can see through the bullshit. So that's kind of how I started.
It's interesting to me that most of the people that I talk to who have woken up, their consciousness is kind of in the forefront, and that includes these intuitive psychic things that are part of, really, they're actually the part of our nature that has been suppressed for thousands of years, as nearly as I can tell, and maybe even longer. But it goes into the fact that the powers that be are fighting a wave that's occurring on this planet, and with each generation in my lifetime, I've seen an acceleration of this. I've seen it in my own children, and I've seen it in the generations that have been, after my own youth. But in one sense, and it goes back to the whole Laurel Canyon thing, the 60s and what happened there, because there was a consciousness wave. Yes, it got dressed up, and yes, it was promoted by very dark forces, and we had Manson and Laurel Canyon and all that bullshit, but something else was really going on.
Yes.
And that's kind of the way this all tends to roll anyway. But they can't suppress it anymore.
That's what I was going to say. Like, even if most of us don't use our psychic abilities most times, most days, in a lifetime, almost every single being has something that slips through that shows you have powers to know things beyond your 5 senses.
And I think you would agree as well that one of the avenues to that actually is the creative process, Elissa. That people who are artistic, and it's not exclusive, but it seems to me like I've played music and done art and done this radio stuff and done all kinds of wild creative things, some things not so good and others, okay. But the creative side is what actually begins to draw this out in us.
Yeah, it's exercising the right brain muscle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, which flows again against the system, which put you in public schools, taught you false history, told you had to be logical and practical, and that you had
changed time on us. They restarted time. Every building has square walls and square roofs, and everything is programming, controlling us. I mean, it sounds terrible, but it's all deliberate, I reckon, so that we will be good little wage slaves and small beings. Yeah.
It's interesting you would bring up changing time, because I've never felt in sync with anything. Even as a kid, I always felt very asynchronous with what was going on around me.
Yeah. And the Gregorian calendar brought in, I think, 13 or 1500s, I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about throwing us off natural moon cycles of 28 days and 4 weeks and, everything in those beautiful rhythmical cycles into 31 days, 28 days, 30 days, 31 days, 30 days, all these arrhythmical sort of patterns, which, of course, we're all going to be turned into hamsters a lot easier if we don't have our natural connection to the cycles of life.
Yeah, when I began to study ancient calendar systems, and I've done that for about 10 years, I was shocked at how cultures pivoted on this, how moon cycles specifically, because you have these 28-day cycles predicated on the lunar cycle, how people lived differently. They had a different consciousness.
Yeah. And also, like, women and sexuality, fertility, all of that is so intertwined. But I actually can see all of this stuff is deliberate, and it's part of their ownership of us, and they consider that they own us, like I say in that video, via the birth certificate, which is actually a bond created when they kill us in a metaphorical sense.
Yes.
By making our name all in capitals, capitis diminutio maxima, which is the greatest loss of status you can give to a being. And that's what all of us have, and we're all happy to have our birth certificate, because with that we can get a passport, we can get a license, we can be part of their system. But we've actually sold ourselves, and because we haven't asked many questions, and it doesn't take that many questions, it just takes a few weeks of reading, studying, and you'll see how this works. And it's just so depressing,
I think for me, first off, I grew up in the backdraft of the 60s and the 70s. And so the 60s loomed large in my consciousness. I heard the conversations about the Kennedy assassination, the death of Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King. And I always studied all that. And when you begin to see patterns, which is something that I kind of tend to do, you go, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this. And I knew people who told me very young in life that this was a game, that this was a game that was very highly controlled. Wow. And intuitively, I knew that. But, you go through the system and you grow up and you want to fit in, and you want a career, and you want to move into all the mainstream aspirations. And for some reason, for me, that just never happened. I never fit in.
Well, we wouldn't be talking if it did, because...
But is that your experience as well?
Yeah, I used to want to be at the top of my game. I'm a comedian, and I was a musician before I was even doing comedy. And I always wanted, just out of a competitive spirit, I thought, if anyone can get to anywhere, I can get anywhere, So it's just out of an urge to prove to myself that I was as good at being myself as anyone else in history. I used to pursue, performing and all of that. And then I sort of got to a stage where I realized nothing comes from the grassroots up. Everything is controlled from above.
Yes.
And I don't want to be in the hands of these types of people who control the music industry or even the comedy world. I don't even want to have somebody from HBO offer me some money to develop an idea, because then I will be, in the palm of these people's hands. I'd rather lay on a beach, drink coconut milk, and daydream. I'm happy to do what I can do if I can do it on my terms. But even I worked recently at the People's Voice, started up by David Icke, a channel in London. And I lasted 5 weeks, my visa ran out, which was part of the problem. But the initial plan was for me to, get sponsored and stay on there and keep making my show. But after 5 weeks, they said I couldn't go live. So I was being suppressed already, even by that channel. So it makes, I just can't work when I don't know who I'm really working for, who's really controlling things.
Well, in this sector that we're in, and I call it the alternative media, and even that's an unfortunate term, I have some friends in the alternative media, and, there's a lot of bleeding people right now, because this arena also has been co-opted. Like I said, I can't be on a network.
It's all disinfo. I was just talking to someone about this morning. If you go and research Sandy Hook or the Boston bombing or a lot of things on the internet, for every one good video, there might be 5 or 10 shit ones or deliberate misinformation, so that if you go around spouting the information yourself, you'll be looking like a dickhead, and everybody will think that the whole thing must be real if you have been sprouting one thing wrong, It's crazy how much disinformation, how many trolls are there to make comments on things and stuff.
Well, and all of that was pre-planned as well.
Yeah.
There are actually reports out there about intelligence agencies, not just the CIA, I'm sure, the British and all the other Western Alliance nations have similar agencies, the Mossad.
Controlled by God knows who, the same people that control our governments, which seem to be Zionist puppets from what I can...
Yeah.
Whether you're looking at Australia, Canada, England, America, we're looking at really...
Yeah, the axis of Britain, the Vatican, Israel, and the United States.
Yeah, the bankers who started the Federal Reserve. You can look at and see the families who own all of our so-called democratic governments. Like, it's so irritating to be amongst a populace who still votes, who still thinks that one side of politics is different from the other. But, you know, I thought that way myself 10 years ago, so I have to give hope that everyone's going to wake up.
Well, for this window of time, we have the ability to do what you and I are doing, which is to be independent. And I just basically have decided to cast all of this into the wind and let it fall wherever it goes, because
I like that.
If you focus on the numbers, I used to look at I was compulsive about numbers. I worked in corporate America. I was compulsive about spreadsheets and statistics and numbers and all that left brain shit. And at some point I went, I'm not looking at this anymore. I don't want to know the numbers. I don't care. Because if I look at this, I'm going to be discouraged. That's what they want. And I know I have something to say. I put it out there. And because of the internet, the way it is right now, we still have this window of opportunity. It's closing. And it's
yes. In the Hunger Games world, we're not going to be able to Skype each other and speak freely.
Well, I have a theory about that, and I've said this because one of my friends asked me, they said, well, what the hell do we do when we can't broadcast anymore? I said, I plan to start broadcasting telepathically. And
I love that, Randy.
And he laughed, and I said, you really don't believe me, do you?
You are so cool. That's the truth, and we all will be.
Because
you can see it now. That's what's beautiful about you.
The mechanics of the internet. I'm a tech guy. I understand how all this technical stuff works. But I will tell you, intuitively, I understood the internet long before it existed. And the reason is because a long time ago, I knew that consciousness was beginning to connect. And the internet isn't the device, it's a metaphor for something else that's coming.
Yes. I truly believe we're going to head into a world where we no longer use words, and that is evidenced by the fact that almost all the words that I hear every day in conversation are useless, meaningless, and don't need to be there. They're just fluff conversations that are just filling up the silence and the awkwardness of the fact that there's no connection.
Words are another form of manipulation, and unfortunately, we lost our abilities a lot. I don't know when we lost this, Elissa, if it was Atlantis, if it was Eden, as they call it, but humanity itself was a telepathic being, deeply connected to a matrix that was not this mechanical matrix that we live in now. And what frightens the powers that be, I think, is the fact that there is this emergence. You have the indigo children, the crystal children. You have, right now it's very tiny, but it's beginning to emerge, people with very visible psychic skills. And you're starting to see it burst out into our entertainment as well.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, mediumship is becoming more common, and there are real mediums out there. You go and explore them. There are also lots of people who are struggling or completely charlatans, but there are also people who can easily connect with the dead and bring messages through. And we all have that ability on some level, and I've proven it in my own life. So if I can do it, everyone can do it. I don't think anyone's got abilities that anyone else doesn't have. I mean, I really think when it comes to things like the sixth sense, it's not like running fast or, having an ability to play piano. I think it's called the sixth sense because it was a part of all of us in history, and therefore it is still a part of all of us now because we're all the one connected thing even through time, because time is a man-made construct.
Exactly. Oh, that's beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, and that's another thing that I battle in myself constantly is this concept of time. It's like death. People are scared of time because they see the clock running on their lives. And if you look at people who live by this strict clock and calendar system that we have, it's aging them. Their awareness of that clock ticking is programmed into their genetics.
Yes, absolutely. And they also think that they have, I don't know, there's like, you know, they already know that they're going to be dead by the time they're 80 or 90 or whatever. And I suppose that's logical thinking, but I don't think like that even. I think whenever the coconut falls on my head is the perfect, beautiful time of the universe, and the universe needs my energy in a different form then. So there can never be a wrong time to die, you know. And once you start knowing that, it just makes everything so much more beautiful for me.
So have you gotten to the place where you're comfortable with this battle that you're in? Because everybody I know who is honest and devoted to truth knows that they're in a battle zone. Your daily life becomes a little bit more challenging every time you notch it up another level. How does that play out in your life?
I honestly, when I have hard times, I actually just think this is not even a hard time, and I think back through history of all the hard times that real saviors and great people have had, and I just think I'm not suffering at all, so I should shut the fuck up and stop whinging. But I don't care how it affects me anyway. I don't care if I get so overwhelmed that it runs me down. I don't care if I end up on a street eating food out of a rubbish bin. All I care about is using my life to awaken the masses to the fact that they're all going along with one way of seeing things. Like, for instance, when I talk about the Boston bombing being faked or the Sandy Hook shooting having all these anomalies, and people don't even want to look at it, but even if they look at it a bit, they can't see it. That I have to spend my life trying to change that, because it's my responsibility. And however that ends up affecting me, I really don't care. But having said that, Randy, I don't have kids. If I had kids, I think I'd be a lot more concerned with keeping my shit together for somebody else's, you know, to be somebody else's rock. But since I don't have kids, I really don't care how it affects me. I just want to use my life to wake people up to the fact that major events are being played out. We're told it's one thing, but it's actually another thing, and that is for a reason. And why these events are being set up is what I'm interested in, and I think it's because they have a plan for humanity, and it's not much better than the plan that Hitler had for the Jews in the Second World War, you know. It's right. Sort of a similar plan. It's like a death camp of some sort or another.
Well, it is a program, and it's a program, first off, to keep people in a constant state of fear. Fear is the opposite of love. And so when...
Sorry, go on, sorry.
No. I just want to say this. The state of fear that people live in is manufactured, and it's very well delivered through every form of medium that we have, television especially, and notably all media network news, because it's designed to keep you anxious. Yes.
And afraid to leave the house, afraid to leave the country, afraid to know your fellow humans, you know, because they're all bad and dangerous and they're trying to rip you off and steal from you and everything. And it's sad how much we've given up our lives to be safe, you know. But it's everybody's free will. They can choose whatever they want. It's just now that I've seen through the charade, I have to bring it to other people's attention, or I wouldn't be able to live with myself. You know, if I'm sitting around a dinner table and my whole family goes, oh, it's the anniversary of the Boston bombing, that was very sad. And if I don't say, what, have you guys not looked at the photos? That was faked. There was fake blood. There were actors. They had their clothes ripped. You can see it just looking at the photos that it was a big drill event bullshit. If I don't say that, then what is my purpose for being alive? If I just sit there and go, pass the carrots.
I don't think most people want to admit that. I had that. For me, the Sandy Hook shooting was when I finally said, okay, I know what the pattern is now, And I actually literally had to disconnect from dissecting any more of these events, because by the time I got to Sandy Hook, I realized how dark this really was.
Well, yeah, this is what I'm talking about patterns for. In 2000, a guy who'd investigated a mass shooting in Australia where one guy went crazy with a gun and shot 55 people in one day and 33 were dead with headshots. You know, this one guy, the week after that event, they brought back all the guns. They had a gun buyback in Australia. They took 600,000 guns off Australians. Mm-hmm. Now, Sandy Hook was the same thing. A week later, it was all about taking the guns off people. Now, 15 years ago, this retired policeman told me they're going to bring in martial law in this, you know, in 2015 to 2020 in first world countries. And I said to this policeman at the time, you are insane if you think we're ever going to have martial law. We're not going to have martial law. And then last year I'm watching the Boston bombing and they bring in martial law to look for these 19-year-old terrorists. And I'm thinking, fucking hell, he was right. They are bringing in martial law.
They not only brought them in, the people welcomed them.
Yeah, they cheered for it. But that group of people cheering were probably crisis actors as well. We've got to realise that.
Yeah.
Even the boys who were patsies, who one's supposedly dead now, maybe even they were crisis actors. We don't know.
I know that in studying what I've been going through over 30 years, I began studying, obviously, the assassinations and then mind control operations. And over the years, I've actually become pretty good friends with some people that went through CIA programs like MK Ultra.
Yeah.
And you begin to realize that the MK Ultra is a model for what they want to project on a mass scale.
Yes.
It's actually less about a Manchurian Candidate or super soldier than it is about models of overlaying their techniques onto the public.
Yes, and incidentally, the guy who did the shooting in Tasmania in Australia, he'd been overseen by Tavistock-trained psychiatrists.
I was going to bring Tavistock up.
10 years old. 10 years old, this kid's being seen by these psychiatrists, and then 18 years later, when he's 28, he goes on this rampage. You know, and then, so I think, you know, occasionally they do make Manchurian Candidates, but you're right. The ultimate effect is to control the minds of all of us. And Kathy O'Brien was the one who alerted me to that.
Yes.
We're not to worry about the 5,000-10,000 people here and there who are under MK Ultra programming. We should be worried about ourselves with the newspaper, the television, your parents, your kids, all the brainwashing through the schools, through the music, through every single thing that we get. It's just an assault all day long.
Yeah,
until you get to a radio show like yours where you can hear something different, you know.
Well, and being able to lock into the content that is free still for a brief period of time. Because really, you know, the scary side of the internet, and I've talked about this, is that they have built a system that makes psychotronics almost universal now, because we're wired. We have phones in our pockets and Wi-Fi's everywhere we go, and we are wired to the teeth now, and it makes it possible to do things that I don't think they could have done even 20 years ago. Yeah.
Not to mention they're probably looking at you through your camera, even if it's not turned on, and they're listening to you, and they're recording every email. I give them butt shots from time to time. They like that. I like to give them everything, and fucking you sort through it, motherfuckers. Yeah. You know, bring me down. Yeah, I'm such a fucking threat. I'm like a girl traveling through life in a tent, just trying to find out the truth. Yeah, I can see why I'm a threat and a domestic terrorist. Yeah, hold me up at the airport for 7 hours. Do whatever you fucking want to me, but, you know, at least I said what I said when I had breath in my body. So the economics of this system, I know that you've done some videos where you've dissected this quite a bit and quite effectively. One of my problems is I still can't seem to explain to people that their economic system is completely false. I just try and refer them to Bill Hicks. But thank you for bringing up Bill Hicks, yes. Yeah. That is the basis of so many arguments. Like, so many people say to me, yes, but if we're going to spend this much on health and this much on guns and this much on planes, I say, look, you are still coming from the point where you believe there is such thing as an economy. You actually believe in the debt. You actually believe that there's a man at the top of a big pile of numbers that goes around the world 10 billion times who's adding up everybody's debt and everybody's credit. It's not real. That's the thing we have to get through our heads. There is no such thing. It's just these people that own the right to print money and to put zeros into their computers to create money, the banking families, who lend 3% of physical money to the governments that they then control through that lending. You know, we have to wake up to the fact that there is no economy. There is no positive and negative. All there is resources, which is all of us and all of nature. Passionate about this.
One of the stunning aspects of the economic system, and it's taken me years to grasp and wrap my head around what they've actually done. But you brought up the birth certificate. And that is, of course, an event that marks you being monetized and sold into the global economy via the bond market. And, of course, their projections on you that you have roughly about 62 years to be productive, and at which point you're a non-productive unit. You are retired. You're given a clock when you retire. Isn't that ironic? The clock ticks down to somewhere between 72 to 80, and you die on cue.
Yeah.
But here's the point. The real resource in all of this has nothing to do with gold or silver or hard assets. It has to do, on one level, with who we are as living souls.
Yeah, our creativity, our kindness, the smile that we give to somebody that we pass in the street that uplifts them. It's immeasurable things that we are. That's really what we are. That is immeasurable. So you can't talk about economy because those things are immeasurable. It's the same as spirit. You can't talk about spirit because it's immeasurable.
Well, and that's what they want. They want everything measured because they're terrified by infinity. They're terrified by the X factor, which is the infinite and which is the God element that lives within inside of each person. And that's the part they've lied about. The part they've lied about is the part that they all their institutions have mainstreamed us into mind-controlled states where we think, first off, that we're under a government, and then that government itself is somehow mandated by some kind of God.
Yes, that was around before we came.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
to give them the right to create the rules. And I was talking to my brother the other day, he's a lawyer, and I was saying, so by what authority can somebody come to your house if you don't pay this or you don't pay that? He said, well, but by the authority that they have the weapons. And I said, exactly, and that's no logical authority. I mean, if I have a weapon, does that mean I can tell you what to do? So nobody has the right to the monopoly on weapons. So therefore, the whole thing's a sham. You've got to see through that, but you can't, because every week you take a wage to continue thinking the way you currently think. And because everybody else seems to be thinking that way, you want to stick with the masses because you think it's safer. But actually, many of us are stepping off and stepping over the other side. So sooner or later, you're not even going to have a job to go to. So get ready for that. That's all I like to say.
Well, and for years, because I do have a family, but my kids are growing up very quickly now. I was terrified by that thought. And I have probably in my entire life been unemployed not enough. I was sick back at the beginning of this year. I was actually in bed on my back for 6 weeks. And I was terrified by that. It was the most liberating experience in the world for me. Because for the first time, I had no visible means of support. I had huge expenses, and I didn't feel real well. But I started to think about it another way, creatively. Yes. And creatively, I got to the place where I'm like, what are we doing here? This land that we live on is ancient. It existed hundreds of thousands of years before men came in and drew maps and boundary lines and then put overlays of geographical territories over them.
And clocks and times.
And churches and all of these horrible systems.
Schools.
And our Aboriginal people actually have the key to all of this because they lived on this land quite successfully for many thousands of years without all of this.
Absolutely successfully. And in Australia, some of us are starting to call them the Aborigine people because the word Aborigine actually is like abnormal. It means not original. So isn't that a nice word for the...
Oh my gosh, I never thought about that.
Language of controlling again, saying that if you're an Aborigine, you're not the original people. It's so bizarre. And then they call themselves that and they have, it's terrible how they control us with words. But yeah, the original people, they lived without all of this stuff. And in fact, all of us lived without even paying income tax up until about 80 years ago. So everything was built. The churches, all the great buildings throughout time have been built without no income taxes. All the roads have been built. Things get done between people because people are creative. We're not going to stop being creative if we don't have an external government with a monopoly on weapons. Where, somebody said to me, but I want my grandma to be able to get her morphine, and if we don't have a government, she won't be able to get painkillers. And I said, there'll still be doctors, there will still be people with access to morphine, and they will still have hearts, and they will still want to help people. Just because we don't have a government to set up how the morphine is distributed, we will work it out. That's what humans do. They talk to each other. They say, I'm hungry. And the other one says, well, I need someone to build me a table. Well, I'll cook you a meal if you build me a table. That's how we all are supposed to exist. We're not supposed to go off for 10 hours a day to make somebody else's dream happen, especially if it's an insurance company or a government department or any of this other crap that people work for, while it takes themselves away from their own initiative, their own reasoning, their own critical intelligence, 10 hours a day. Imagine what the world would be like if all the people who worked were following their own hearts for 10 hours a day for that 50 years of their employment. And
now we have technology that enables us to work less hours. The irony of that is we aren't working less hours. Now we're slaves to the technology.
Yeah. I know, we have to, in ourselves, free ourselves. That's the bottom line. We can't wait for a government to dismantle itself. We have to learn independence. We have to learn how to live in many different climates and nationalities, and we have to learn to live amongst people that we don't share language with. We need to learn skills that make us useful to other people, and we need to learn how to share those skills whilst being sociable enough that people want those skills from us. And once we get like this and get amongst a community of people who share their skills, then that's how we're supposed to live, and that will be a beautiful time because we'll all follow our own creativity. We'll do the thing that's easiest for us, that we have most interest in, and the world's going to advance in leaps and bounds.
Really, I get the sense that on one level, they can't really stop the free fall that's going on in the economic system because the economic system is cannibalizing itself. You simply cannot sustain, boy, I hate that word, sorry.
That's okay.
You can't continue to cannibalize the monetary system the way they've done it. There are no books. They can't balance it. I love that Western governments, I know it's the same in England, I know it's the same in Australia, they all want you to present your papers and do your forms and fill out your taxes. Well, who in the hell has ever audited the governments or the Federal Reserve banks? I want to see their fucking books. Because
the CCTV, let's put CCTV everywhere in the judges' chambers and the police unions.
Yeah. I don't file taxes anymore. I haven't filed taxes for almost 20 years.
Me neither.
I'm living proof that if you are confident enough in your own moral convictions, you can stand up to an Internal Revenue Service or
absolutely. And you know what? For me, it's like asking me to pay tax to Santa Claus. I do not believe in its existence, so I'm not going to give them any of my energy in the form of money. And as far as tax goes, I pay tax when I give money to a busker or money to a person on the street who asks me. That's my tax. When somebody in front of me needs something that I have, I give it. You know, and I think that that's the tax that we are all throughout time. That's the only tax we need to worry ourselves with, is the help that our fellow beings need when they're in front of us. And we also learn that we too can receive at times when our fellow beings have something that we need and we don't have. And we pay that forward. We may never pay that original person back, but we have in the goodness of our heart the memory and gratitude for that gift that came to us. So we therefore give that ourselves later. We don't need to be told by anyone how much to give and for what purpose and how many fighter jets they're going to buy with our money.
When you set in motion that type of thing, what begins to happen, again, is a spiritual currency. This is the hardest thing for me to explain to people. The principle, you use the term paying forward, and I like it. I love that movie. When we put it out there, when we give without expectation of receiving back, because everything in our culture is about acquisition. It's about having a bigger house, a better car, this consumer lifestyle that feeds this beast. And the beast would starve if we worked the way we were going, because I would have nice jewelry because somebody made me a piece of jewelry with love. Yeah. It would be unique, and it would be gifted, and it would have a special resonance to it. And because we're so dumbed down right now in the Western cultures, we don't understand our own energetics actually create a currency of wealth that is so abundant. No one needs to be hungry. Nobody needs to be homeless. No one needs to be sick. Precisely.
It's true. More food is produced than the people that are here by billions of people. And it's just the economic bullshit that keeps people from eating.
Yeah. They had, here in the United States, I know they do this as well in the Commonwealth nations. We had farming systems. My grandfather was a farmer. And they had food subsidy programs, which amounted to destroying half of your crops so that you didn't bump the market prices off. You know, they'd plow under wheat, they'd plow under corn, they'd burn certain consumer items, they would destroy them because they needed to prop up the prices.
This is all from the insanity of privately owned money.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a great guy, let me try and remember his name, Konstantin Kirsch on the YouTube, and he talks about how to create your own money. And basically, he just creates little certificates for himself that say, I will give you this much honey if you give me this. And he creates his own worth by what he exchanges. And then he connects with a group of people who have different skills. So if you don't want to swap him directly, you can swap with any of the other people in his group. Now, I've belonged to a barter community like this in Australia for about 10 years. And it was wonderful. I did a lot of bartering. I bartered for my wisdom teeth removed, $3,000 of dentistry. I massaged my dentist and his wife and his daughter for 2 years. You know, like this is how humans are supposed to interact. And if you have interactions without money, you actually create relationships as well, which is another byproduct of not using money. When somebody fixes your car and you pay them $400, it's like, see you later. When somebody fixes your car and you have to create something or bring them some useful service, there has to be some kind of trust and relationship created. And if you don't bring them something worthy, they won't deal with you again. And it's like eBay, you know, we're all going to, if we don't keep up a good reputation, we're not going to be able to operate. So we all have to live at a standard. It's really interesting how much we would be better off without external governance.
Yeah. Well, because those external governments are mediaries, they're not By the way, here's the biggest thing of all. Everything is a corporation, and a corporation is a dead entity.
Yes. A corpse orating.
Yeah.
Have you heard of that?
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that we've been looking at over the years, and I say we because there's a loose group of people that I connect with, is looking at corporation status and can a dead, artificial, non-living being actually take action against a living soul?
And it can't, and that's why they create a corporation out of the person. If you look up the word person in Black's Law Dictionary, it says a corporation. Mm-hmm. So we get created into people or persons when we get the birth certificate. And that way the government, which is a dead body that speaks, because a government isn't anything real. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't bleed. So it can't have power over you because you bleed and you breathe. So the only way it can have power over you is it creates a piece of paper bond you, the U in capital letters, and because that bond has the same name, Randy Maugans, you think, oh my God, that must be me. And we've all fallen for it.
We've all fallen for it, but we don't have to continue to fall for it because it's not me. It's not, Elissa is not all capital letters, filed on a registry somewhere and certified as a commodity to be traded on the international exchanges.
And I'm not a corporation. I'm a being. I'm a living being.
I can't begin to tell you, Elissa, how important that distinction needs to be. This needs to be made. You see, the concepts are simple. That's a simple concept if you can wrap your mind around it. I've said to people,
we need to remember who we are. We're superpowers. Yeah. We are the living God. We are the living nature, love itself. We're consciousness. We are one of the highest things around, so we're taught to believe we're sinners, we're dirty, little, masturbating, nose-picking, farting, fucking wastes of space, cancers upon the earth, whatever you want to call yourself.
Yeah.
That's what we're trained to believe that we
shame.
are.
You're constantly shamed by your condition.
Yeah.
All your natural...
And your breath isn't clean, and you're too fat, and your teeth aren't white enough, and you don't have the right hair, and, everything is wrong with you. Really, really, really what we are is so profound that thing called government has no hope of controlling us apart from with violence. That's the only way they can do it. But what we are, we need to remember who or what we really are. We're so magical. Once I had this beautiful teacher, and she said to me, if you want to know how amazing humans are, just realize this. Angels serve humans.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if I believe in angels with wings and white dresses, but I believe that there are entities that can give us hope or help or information. Or
absolutely.
I call them angels. Maybe they're dead relatives. I don't know what they are, but she said angels serve humans. So don't think of yourself as lowly on some scale, because angels serve humans. And that made me realize how beautiful and special every single being is, even if they're doing horrible things here on this planet.
Yeah, because it's a mask. We're playing roles right now. We're in this state where we have chosen to incarnate into a world where you have all of this contrast, all of this friction that goes on, and we have amnesia. We're gods in amnesia. We simply don't know who we are, but we're waking up. Some of us are.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful time to be alive. But people probably said that 100 years ago, 500 years ago. I mean...
Well, it always kind of is. I mean...
I see a golden age ahead. I really can.
There is a golden age ahead, and that's the part of the reason why we are at this juncture right now in the global onslaught is because they are scared shitless. I will say it again. They are scared shitless by the few that they think have woken up. It doesn't take a majority to turn a culture. It is never a majority that turns a culture.
I was just watching something the other day, and it was a bit of footage of the Queen outside Buckingham Palace after Diana's death.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought,
I'm sure she was real torn up by that.
I heard a good joke. What do you get if you cross the Queen and Prince Philip?
I have no idea.
Killed in a tunnel.
Yeah, exactly.
I was thinking, like, she must be standing there just thinking, this tide, this sea of people, they could so easily crush me. They're fucking brave to go out in public, those so-called self-appointed elite. I think they are very brave to go out in public, and there's going to be a day where they're going to be in hiding. They're going to need underground friggin' bases because the people are going to have woken.
Their bases are not going to protect them because what's coming is something quite extraordinary, in my opinion. And it's arcing up very quickly now, and they can go underground into the little hidey holes. But the forces that are working now are galactic. I mean, this is my belief. This is what I know.
It's true. I believe, too.
The galactic shift is something they can't contain, control, or hide from, and they're terrified of it.
And love is the reason and the season. Like, some people go, there's no such thing as love. I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm talking about love versus fear, love versus indifference. This whole perfect, imperfect universe, chaos, multiverse, whatever it is heading in one direction towards love and enlightenment of itself. And that has to occur just by us experiencing life. We don't even have to learn lessons. We just have to experience things and we grow. So I can only see one direction that we're headed, and that's why I'm on the team I'm on, is because I want us all to get there as fast as we can.
Yeah, and truthfully, it is accelerating, and because linear time isn't a real concept here, the universe has its own clock. I call them intervals because they can flip very suddenly. I am like the weirdest person in the world, but I've said this to some of my friends. I've said there are days when I walk around and I see the ripples in the fabric of the space-time continuum. I watch it break down.
Yeah, it's like those backtuns in the Mayan calendar, the speeding up of the processes of segments of time, shortening.
Yeah. So what we can do in the interim is kind of what I'd like to hear you talk about, is your own coping mechanisms, your own way of presenting your message, and having a spectacular life despite the fact that we do live in somewhat of a hamster cage right now.
Well, for me, everything is trial and error. And even though for 4 years now I've been traveling, moving, living in all sorts of different countries, mainly Central America and Mexico, but I'm just learning how to become a business person and how to do the things that I can do to be helpful for any community. And that's many things. I mean, I do everything from, I make pies and I run my friends' restaurants and bars. I've been a massage therapist for 25 years. I'm a yoga teacher. I do stand-up gigs. I do music occasionally. I do whatever I can do in whatever community, wherever I am, that feels right at the time. And I'm also trying to open up other avenues to bring in income. Like I'm writing a book, but as for writing a book for income, it's just such a joke because I can never stand anything that I wrote 6 months ago. So I don't want to have a book. I don't want anything published that I have to stand by in the future, So I'm flailing around like a hopeless case as best as I can, but I see other people with proper careers with salaries and mortgages doing that as well. So I know that we're all kind of flailing around trying to make the best of our lives. For me, the answer is I like traveling and living in other countries where I'm not considered owned by the government of the day. So that's why I don't like living in Australia. So getting out of Australia again soon so that I can I like to live on the beach. I think in life it's a beautiful earth, and you may as well find a beautiful place in nature to appreciate that. I don't see the point in living in a city. I don't, especially now that you can have everybody in the world in your computer. And as long as you can have Wi-Fi once a week, I think you can live on a tent in the middle of nowhere and have a beautiful life. Yeah. So, yeah, that for me is what I'm about. I'm going to keep... I've always been into this idea of healing myself, healing whoever I can help, because I know life's hard and life's sad and it's really difficult for everyone. You know, it's just an incredible thing to get through 70 or 90 or 20 years on this planet. So I've always sort of been into healing, and when I started out by massaging, that was like my first career when I left school. I realized after a while that I can only heal certain things, and that all physical pain ultimately comes from existential spiritual pain. So I'm started to look at healing through music and using music to change vibration, and healing through comedy and laughter, making people awaken to concepts that were making them sick by holding incorrect values or ideas. So comedy is a great tool for that, because when somebody laughs, they can't deny that they know a deeper truth. Yes. And then for other stuff, for me, even conversations like this with you, this is healing for me. When I listen to a conversation between two people on a radio show, that helps me to heal by coming into my own truth more fully. Yeah. So I really am grateful for your offer to speak with you, and it's really, I can see why you wanted to speak with me, because we are on a similar kind of wavelength and a lot of stuff.
And again, this is a lot of it, and I do this sometimes, and people do it to me too. We reach out to each other it was intuitive, it wasn't thought out. And this is about community building. Across the globe, connecting, because there's a psychic connection that occurs with people, and we carry each other, we carry a piece of each other around with us, and that beacon is there. It's connecting the planet, and we can't have the illusion that we're going to change the world like wild, radical, crazy hippies maybe did 40 or 50 years ago. But we can change the world one person at a time, and if each person did that on a cellular scale, it just mushrooms.
Well, you've done the work, Randy. You've changed yourself. You've made it so that you no longer give your energy in the form of money or taxes to your government as much as you can avoid that, right, because you've educated yourself to know that there's no reason why you should have to anymore. You no longer give money to the bully, so the bully leaves you alone. It's a beautiful thing, actually.
I won't say they completely leave me alone. They send me lots of letters. And you know, we send them back.
It's to contract,
because I look at it, I pick it up, and I go like, I open the letter, and I went, wait a minute, this is addressed to somebody else. That's not me.
That's not me.
That's all capital letters.
Anything that's addressed in capital letters, I write return to sender.
Yeah, this person's dead.
If you send their contracts back in the mail, then there's not a little old lady at the desk going, oh, Randy, I thought he was a good American. He's just pretended he's not home and sent it back. No, it's a computer, and the computer goes, Randy Maugans did not receive his latest fine, so we need to send it again because he didn't get the contract. Because if you open the letter and just throw it in the bin, they assume you got it, and then they can act on you. But if you keep returning their contracts back and you never physically keep their contract, they can't do much with you.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we need to seriously educate people about. It's something that I'm still learning. I'm still constantly reconfiguring strategies and ways to deal with them. If I have to go into their courts, how do I appear? There are all.
For me, was to change the way I thought, and the way I changed the way I thought with gusto was by reading Mary Elizabeth Croft's free book on the internet. It's called How I Clobbered Every Bureaucratic Cash Confiscatory Agency Known to Man. Everyone who's listening, Google that, How I Clobbered. by Mary Elizabeth Croft.
And I'll put a link up to that because
it'll change your life. It's just, once you've read that book, it's got the whole history of the Federal Reserve. You can never pay this stuff again. You just can't live as a slave anymore because you realize you're in the wrong if you comply. This is how Hitler got all those willing Germans to carry out the policies that they carried out, is because everybody complied with a government that had gone tyrannical.
Yeah. And we don't have to buy into their charade anymore of being an artificial entity. And the implications of that are a death of the consciousness, a death of the soul. And we need to bring that back. I've started to talk more about bringing back the living into processes, of not abdicating our humanness, our soul, and giving it over as collateral for these rogue governments.
Yeah, these people who believe that they have the right to own us. Hello? No. Imagine owning people. What would you ever own somebody, Randy, in that sense? Unless they wanted to be owned and you wanted to be owned back.
I can't imagine owning another human being. I think even in love relationships, that's every day. I mean, you can have relationships with people and love them very dearly. People change. Yeah. And we don't own anyone. We don't own our children. I learned that the hard way. Yeah. I learned that even in my own life with myself when I realized what you opened with tonight about the story about your father. We should honor our parents because, we don't know what they went through in their lives. But I had a very fractious relationship with my father until probably the last 10 years of his life. It was a relationship that was constant friction because I was the rebel. I didn't step into the family business. I didn't trot the company line. I didn't look right. But the thing about it is that love is a negotiation, and it is higher than that because there's another level to love that goes into an energetic that we then can begin to propel ourselves off onto.
Randy, you're giving me goosebumps. It's true, and it's so beautiful that you say that because I'm still in a difficult period with my own parents, and that's something that I know love will overcome. Yeah. And time, but it's good to hear you say that, without changing those aspects of yourself, love trumped in the end.
I think, too, it's very difficult for parents because there's the old model of a parent is the same perception of a power struggle or a power structure that exists with our governmental and our churches and everything else. When we get real with each other, as I did with my father, about 10 years before he died, my father was a Korean War veteran. And he sat one night at the table and told me, he said, we all knew it was a joke. He said, it was not glory. He said, we watched what they did in the Sea of Japan. I mean, he was on a battleship. He had a battleship blown out from underneath him. Wow. He knew the facade of the negotiations that were going on in Korea, just as they did in Vietnam, just as they've done in every war that we've ever had. They put up a pretense of peace talks when, in fact, all they were doing was arranging who was going to finance the next rounds of body counts from these horrible... This is the part that makes me emotional, because I remember seeing the Vietnam War and seeing people come back from it and people who didn't come back from it. And I don't resonate with that. I don't resonate with war and death and mechanized death the way it's been propelled across the stage of history in the last 100 years. Yeah. And that's just an example of how relationships shift and change. At some point, the child becomes the parent and the parent becomes the child. And that's another very difficult and yet moving moment in one's life.
Yeah. It's the cycles, round and round and round.
Gosh, I feel like you're interviewing me. You've pulled stuff out of me I've never talked about on air before.
I actually have that ability with people all around the world. They tell me their secrets, and that's why I love being a talk show.
Yeah, it's a gift. That's a gift.
Well, you know, I have no judgments. I really don't. I only observe. It's not to say people don't piss me off, because they do.
Sure.
And, you know, in that regard, I'm aware that I still have judgments. But if it comes to looking at things out there in the world, I can really see all of them, all acts, all murder, all pedophilia, all abuse, whether it be silent or violent, or all government abuse of people, or people's abuse of each other. I can see it all under the umbrella of love, learning, evolution. And so I let it all be. And I don't know what made me speak about that, apart from the fact that I can tell you've come around to that kind of a place yourself, and it's probably what makes you be so open, because when you share yourself openly, other people can then step into that in a public way too.
Well, that was kind of where we met each other on common ground, because that, when I saw that video, the car crash video, I went, this is authentic, this is real communication. I don't need the screaming idiots. I don't need the overdressed, primped up, beautiful people that parade themselves across my video screen. Damn it, I want reality. I want real. I want somebody that's coming from a heart place. And when I saw your video, I went, man, this is it. This is what I want. I want to see this. I want to hear this. I want to put this out.
Well, it's embarrassing for me to have that moment put out publicly, but I did it because it so shows me why I do what I do. It explains me to people who don't understand me. If I were to die tomorrow, that video itself would explain to people why I have seemingly done things that have made me suffer, but I do them because I don't suffer very much. And what I feel is the result of it is that 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 or 3,000 or 15,000 or 100,000 people are eventually going to be able to be moved by it and step into their own truth. And I had people do that for me. And so those people, they put their necks out, you know, they stuck their neck out. And so if I step up into their shadow, then their neck is not their head's not the only one on the chopping block. And then if I inspire people under me to come in and put their head out, then it allows all of us to step over into truth and away from this web of lies that we've literally been marinating in since birth.
When one person stands up, then somebody else joins them, and pretty soon you see the ripple effect. You get a wave, and that's what we're doing. We're igniting waves. They're tiny, they're ripples right now, but they're cascading out there.
Yeah, so many people say, well, we can't change anything. It's always been this way. We're always going to have to live this way. There's always going to be one group that asserts itself over the others. Well, why? Why? There can be no logical explanation for why any group should have the monopoly on power. And if that group hides itself behind many nations and calls itself governments and all of that, it doesn't mean that we're fooled. And so we're stepping into a consciousness now which this can no longer exist within. And the more of us that step into this consciousness, the less of us that are paying taxes, voting, giving our energy to the television, you know, giving out 50 cents to the newspaper, letting them know we still listen to you, we still believe in you. If we're all just interacting with our own local communities or with people through the internet that we resonate with as other truthful people with integrity, then that other life, that other world doesn't even exist once we pull our energy away.
Yes, it'll be a war of attrition. Someday they will wake up and they'll realize they don't have their minions anymore. They don't have their armies because they've laid down their guns and walked away. And as utopian and starry-eyed as that sounds, the galaxies are fighting for us, Elissa.
I believe that,
the universe is battling for us.
I believe you are so right. If there is any external conscious being that is separate or more than the all that is, which is enough for me. The all that is and is not, that's enough for me, that organized thing. I can call that God, no worries at all. I'm not talking about a man in the sky, but the all that is, if that doesn't itself want to see the human race free itself from being owned and manipulated by 0.0000001% of itself, then we may as well all just cark now, because life itself wants humanity to free itself, but nobody else is going to do it. You got to free yourself.
Beautifully said, and I think that's a great way to wind up this interview. Again, let people know where they can find you, when they can find you, on the internet, of course, because you're obviously moving around a lot, but let people know where they can locate you and find your work.
Thank you so much, Randy. It's been a really beautiful, enlightening, and exciting conversation. It's moved my physical body several times with excitement of the awakening of all around the planet, you know, that this is inside us. It's not just something we get from reading or talking or watching movies. It's something that's born from within us and without us, or wherever that beautiful God thing cometh from. Yeah. So anyway, if anyone wants me, my name is Elissa Hawke, ELISSAHAWKE, and elissahawke.com is my blog site where I've been blogging for a few years, just collecting news and information that's relevant to what's happening to humanity. And now I'm doing a show called Illicit Talk, and hopefully we'll feature Randy as a guest before too long. You up for that, Randy?
Absolutely. I love the talk.
I just talk with my heroes, with people on this planet who have lived their lives out on a limb, so that we can all free our minds and free ourselves from the current state of slavery that all of humanity has been brainwashed into accepting for itself. So, come check me out on YouTube. And, thanks for listening. I really appreciate the chance to explain myself a bit.
Thanks for coming on to Elissa. This has been a great conversation, and probably not real family friendly if you don't like radical ideas and a couple F-bombs thrown along the way, but oh well, that's the way it goes. This is OffPlanet Radio, although sometimes it doesn't sound like it, and I'm Randy Maugans. The truth is out there. It's inside you. Keep looking for it. We'll be back with another show real soon.
You are listening to OffPlanet Radio at offplanetradio.net and offplanetradio.com.